Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Wanted to be mindful of everybody's time and I wanted to get us starting on time. So again, welcome everybody as you're joining us. Please, as we always do with our webinars, please drop into the chat your name, where you're joining us from. I am always so glad that you're here, even though I can't see you. Um, My name is Annette Mendez, and I am joining you on behalf of Good Grief. And today we're going to be talking about something that a lot of times gets overlooked in schools. And that's how transitions, particularly in the spring, how they can intensify a grief for some students, right? So spring really brings big feelings, right? For some of us, it's hope, it's excitement, it's warmer weather, right? It's change. But for those of us that are grieving and our students, right, it can also bring a lot of anxiety, a lot of comparison going on, a lot of overwhelmed. Let me get this out of the way. Sorry about that. So, we're really going to be talking about that today. But before I dive in, as we always do, let me tell you a little bit about Good Grief. For those of you who are new to Good Grief, we are a nonprofit organization that has been around in New Jersey since 2004. And our mission, as it shows on your screen, is really to build resilience in children, strengthen families, and really empower communities to grow from loss and adversity. For most of our organization's history, we've been providing free. I always like to pause there because we're donor and grant funded, free and unlimited peer support programs to grieving children and families. Our children start at age 3 and go all the way to age 30. And we do this in our centers, one in Princeton and one in Morristown. In more recent years, our work has really been growing through education and through advocacy and through webinars such as the one you're on today. We're able to provide, curriculum and resources and workshops and PDs to schools, to hospitals, to the healthcare industry, the funeral industry, corporations, right? The broader community. We really just go where the grief is, and we know that the grief is everywhere, and we just go there to support the needs of children and families, and kind of help them talk through and talk about how we can grow from loss and adversity. As you can see again in your screen, you see here 37 Elm Street. The need and the response to our Morristown Center was huge. And so in 2012, Good Grief responded to that emerging needs of families who were traveling all these crazy distances by bringing Good Grief programs to Princeton as well. And so our Princeton house was born, so to speak, right? But beyond our nights of support, Good Grief runs a grief expressions camp. We also provide valuable training and PD experiences, like our yearly Spring Institute that just passed in March, as well as offer these free community webinars for you guys every month. Sometimes it's someone from Good Grief, like myself or Gina or someone from our education department. And sometimes we phone a friend. So if you are interested in giving a webinar for us, I will be putting my email at the end and just reach out and I'm sure there's a way that we can collaborate together, right? We always strive to continually bring the work that we do inside our centers outside and go where the grief is, like I said, to really enable communities to support one another and to build resilience. Our nights of support, or NOS, as you might hear them be called, always starts with a pizza dinner for our participants. We provide dinner for those who are joining us because it's one less thing that they have to worry about, right? They come in, our facilitators meet prior to participants joining them. This way they get to discuss, how the evening's gonna go, who's gonna do what, right? And pre-group is really an integral part of our nights of support. And then, we have dinner and then we have participants that go to their opening circle. And I'm gonna show you what that kind of looks like. So in your opening circle, which is this picture right here, where if you feel so inclined, you have a talking stick, you say the name of the person who has died, and then you go on to your groups, right? And as you can see in this second picture here, right, although participants are navigating the hardest times of their life, there's a lot of joy that happens in our centers. And that duality is really something that I always like to point out because in grief, you're going to have those moments. You're going to have those moments of joy. You're going to have those moments of sadness, right? You're even going to have those moments of anger. Um, and all of those emotions are not only welcomed at Good Grief, but we invite you to explore them and let you know that you are safe to do that and that you're not by yourself. I really encourage those of you that are in New Jersey that are, and are near Morristown or near Princeton to come by and get a tour of our buildings and really learn a little bit about how we use these spaces with intentionality, and maybe even ways that you could become a part of our Good Grief mission, or maybe how Good Grief can collaborate with your school district or your organization for workshops and trainings. That saying, reach one, teach one, that's kind of like what we like to live by over at Good Grief. We just want to get grief literacy and grief information into the hands of folks that can really use it. So if you're interested in learning more about our programming, you can shoot us an email at info@good-grief.org. And if you're interested in learning more about bringing Good Grief to your schools, you can also shoot us an email at education@good-grief.org. I also want to mention really briefly that tomorrow, May 1st, we're going to be having another webinar that's titled Beyond Generosity, the Personal and Financial Benefits of Legacy Giving. It's going to be chock full of information that will kind of help you figure out ways that your generosity can help organizations like Good Grief while you're here and beyond. So I hope that some of you get to join us. If you want more information on that, I will gladly send it on over. So I always like to mark the time of our time together, time of our time, say that 3 times fast, right? With a grounding or an open ring ritual of sorts, right? So if you can, I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't want someone to come look in your office and see you with your eyes closed and you say that Annette told you so. If you can, I invite you to sit up comfortably where you are and close your eyes if you can. Or maybe you can choose to soften your gaze a little bit and focus on something that's near you. I just want us to kind of take a collective breath together, right? We're going to go in through our nose and we're going to hold it for 3, and then we're going to come out of our mouths and hold it for another 3, okay? So take a deep, deep breath in through your nose with me and just hold it, and then out of our mouths. Let's do that 2 more times, okay? So let's go in through our nose and just hold it for a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3. And our last one. And as you're slowly coming back to this space, I want you to start calling to mind a student or a client, or maybe even a child in your life, who you think a lot about when you hear the word transition, right? Maybe they're going to a new school. Maybe they're starting a new grade. Maybe there's some big change that's going on for them. And I just want you to call this person to mind and don't react, right? Don't start making any transition plans, right? I just want you to hold that person during our session together, okay? Just think about that. So as we get started, I really want to ground us in what we're going to be focusing on today, and what I really hope that you'll walk away with. This time of year is full of transitions, right? We have celebrations, we have endings, we have new beginnings, right? And while these moments are often framed as very exciting, we know that for a lot of students, this can really intensify their grief, right? So today we're going to take a look at this through a very specific lens, right? First, I want us to kind of build some shared understanding of how grief shows up during transition moments, especially in the spring, because grief isn't always about death, right? It doesn't always look like sadness. A lot of times it comes up in ways that are really easy to miss or easy to misunderstand within a school setting, right? So from there, I want us to focus on really recognizing what this actually looks like in students, right? What does it look like behaviorally, emotionally, socially, right? And a lot of what we see in this time of year, right? That shutdown, that, oh my God, I'm so done, that avoidance, that irritability, right? It can be connected to change and grief, and both those things happening at the same time, right? And then we're going to move into what we actually can do, right? I'm going to share some very practical SEL aligned strategies that you can use right away in your classrooms, small groups, or across your school environment, right? These are meant to be really supportive, not overwhelming at all. We like to focus on tiny tweaks at Good Grief, right? So small shifts that you can make and that'll really have a meaningful impact on the folks that you're with, right? And then finally, we're going to talk about what it means to support these students through these, through a relational responsive lens, right? Because grief is shaped by identity, it's shaped by community, it's shaped by lived experiences, and how we show up really matters. And as we move through this, again, I invite you to keep that one student in your mind, right? Someone who might be navigating a transition right now. And again, just notice what comes up as you go, right? I don't want you to make any plans or jot anything down, like this is what's happening, this is what I'm going to do. Just bring them to mind, right? I Are we cool with how these where we're headed is going to go? Like, I can't see you guys, but I'm a serial optimist, so I'm going to assume we're all saying right on a net, and away we go. So when we say spring transitions, right? And I'm really going to rely heavily on my chat today. So when we say spring transitions, what do we mean? What's going on in the spring that might make kids feel a little, what do you think? If you're an educator, I know some of these are going to come up super quick. But indulge me, if you will. What are some spring transitions that kids might be navigating right now in the month of April and May? Yes, graduation, summer's around the corner. Testing. Yes, testing is huge. Moving up, absolutely. Yeah, state testing, those high school or college acceptance letters, right? Those promotion ceremonies, the prom, the formals, end of year goodbyes, right? All of those, let me put them back up. All of these moments are filled with transition, right? And transitions, they trigger grief. Why is that? Because grief lives in our nervous system, right? It's not only about sadness. It's about a sense of safety that's been disrupted, right? Spring transitions can activate, a fear of change. That's hard, even for some adults, right? That pressure to start fresh when you feel super stuck and you don't really want to start fresh, right? That comparison, right? Oh, he got in there and I didn't, right? Comparison with our peers who just seem to just be moving on and moving forward, and we're kind of just like, all right, you know? Transitions are not just change. They're a loss and they're an adjustment. Excuse me. And even positive transitions, right? Like graduation, new school year, and I use positive in quotations, right? That has, a loss of routine, a loss of identity, a loss of predictability, right? A loss of relationships, right? Maybe you and someone who you've been in the same class with since kindergarten, now you're going to be in separate classrooms, right? That's hard for some kids, right? A lot of students, they lose their people, they lose their roles, their routines, their sense of self, right? And let's break it down to what those shifts are. Like, what shifts are we going to be seeing while they're going through these transitions, right? We might see behavioral shifts, right? Coming in hot is what I hear a lot of my middle school teachers and high school teachers tell me. They're coming in hot. There's a lot more physical things going on in those crowded hallways, right? They're bumping into each other a little more than usual, right? There's that increased irritability, that increased conflict, right? I hear that some of them are shutting down. Some of them are avoiding everything altogether, right? They're skipping class, they're skipping events. They have this anxiety around testing, right? And I hear again from a lot of educators who are like in middle school and high school that, hey, we might see these in a span of a week, a day, or even period to period, right? So we have that behavioral shift. Then we have that emotional shift, right? That heightened sense, that heightened sensitivity to rejection, right? What if I don't get into the college that my mom says I have to get into, right? What if I ask my prom date if they want to go to the prom and they're like, no, thanks, right? Spring sports, so huge. What if I don't make the team? What if they don't invite me to the party of the year, right? This hopelessness about, if I'm going to fail my college entrance exam, if they still do those things, or, is the teacher going to be mad at me if I don't do really well on this test, right? A lot of times we don't think about it because they're in middle school, but those middle school relationships, right? My best friend is not sitting at the same table with me anymore, and I have no idea why, right? We might also see that academic shift, right? That academic shift where, they're kind of like, I'm kind of done with all of this. Sudden dips in their performance, right? Maybe they're completely distracted. Maybe they're just so overly focused on what you're doing, right? And again, those social shifts, pulling away from their peers, comparing themselves, really feeling out of sync with friends, right? Because they're celebrating certain milestones and you are just not feeling it, as they say, right? It's important for us to understand that children, while they age chronologically, they grieve developmentally, right? And that's really important for us to understand because it shifts and it changes how we support. So let's look at grief through a developmental lens, right? So what we might be seeing in elementary school students, and please drop in the chat if you are like, hey, I also see this, right? We might be seeing, that fear of change, those worries about moving up. As a former preschool and kindergarten teacher myself, I really did not like moving up days because I missed my kiddos. I just spent from September to June trying to get them to trust me and not cry every time they were dropped off at the door. And now I have to drop them off, to a different classroom. So that's hard for both the educator and the child, right? So we might see a lot of regression, a lot of clinginess, a lot of really big emotions and very limited vocabulary, right? They're feeling all these feelings when they have no way of kind of bringing that out to us unless it's in their behavior, right? So we might see a lot of behaviors that we might not be too fond of, right? And in middle school, we could see that increased, self-consciousness, that comparison to their peers, that comes really, really intense, right? Their struggles with identity, right? Who am I? Like, what group am I in? Here at the middle school, they separate them into different teams. And from like August to about November, we have kids who are just beside themselves because they're on a team with people that they don't know, right? It's really hard for them. They have a hard time expressing their feelings again, but they have these strong internal experiences and they don't know how to bring it out. And then in high school, we could see, that anxiety about the future, right? That pressure during acceptance season, right? That grief during graduation, right? Where, they really notice who's not there, right? Who's not here to witness this for me? And then we see that increased risk taking or that withdrawal, right? Students often will say to you, not often, students will not say to you, I'm grieving. They'll often say it through their behavior, right? So we just dipped our toes a little bit into this, the developmental lens of this. And I want to look at some quick scenarios that you might see either in your schools or maybe with a client. And I'm purposely vague because I want to see what you guys come up with, right? So we have this first scenario where we have a sixth grader whose parent died last year, right? And they become very anxious during this state testing prep. This person cries in class. She refuses to participate. And all she says is, I'm going to fail everything. What's happening here? What are we witnessing here? It's not just test anxiety. What else is happening here? Grief. Yes, Deborah, thank you. There's a lot of grief there, right? It's not test anxiety in that isolation. It's grief activation under this performance pressure, right? What else? What else are we seeing? For this student, right, testing season is not neutral. It's emotionally loaded, right? Standardized tests really have become quite a trigger, and they have a lot of layered fears in there, right? You have this fear of failing. Although, and I will give tons of credit to educators, I've heard many teachers, you're not graded for this. This is just to see what you know. I've even seen teachers who are just like, we're just going to keep on business as usual because it's just too much pressure for them. But still, these kids know and they see and they hear other people and they're like, I don't want to let my teacher down, right? I don't want them to look at my test and think that my teacher didn't show me anything, right? They have that internalized pressure that's tied maybe to a parent who's no longer here. Maybe this parent who died in this girl's life was, her cheerleader, right? Maybe she was the one who reassured her, who encouraged her, who really witnessed her effort, right? And now she's not there. They might think if I do really bad in this test, that I'm failing my person who died as well, right? So in other words, this test is not just about academic performance. It becomes this symbolic space where grief and identity and pressure are all intersecting, right? What's happening here emotionally and developmentally? What do you guys think? Yes, I see approaching the anniversary. Absolutely. Their security is gone, hyper focus on testing as a way to cope with the grief. I absolutely have seen that as well. Yes, grief in children increases lack of confidence and self-doubt. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, early onset of hormonal changes. There's so much going on, right? I always refer back to that image of that iceberg, right? We see something, but what's going on is way bigger than what we even thought, right? And those early onset of hormonal changes, for sure. They have no idea what's going on. They're like, I don't know why I want to cry right now, right? Lack of support. Yeah, since the caregiver is not around, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, grief in children often, it resurfaces in very nonlinear situational waves, right? And academic evaluations, that can really trigger those attachment related distresses, right? This child might lack that language to say, you know what? This reminds me of when my person was here and I felt alone and she knew how to dot, 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 right? But I know some adults that can't even articulate that, right? Instead, it's going to show up as refusal, as shut down. It's going to show up in those somatic complaints, right? My head hurts, my stomach hurts. I'm just really tired. I'm just really fatigued. I just want to go lay down, right? Those global blanket statements like I'm just going to fail everything and I'm just awful at everything, right? Testing season is not just academic pressure for grieving kids. It can become, an emotional reenactment of loss, of responsibility, right? And that fear of disappointing someone who can't respond to us anymore, right? That person can't say, "Hey, listen, you're not going to fail. You're not going to let me down," right? It's up to us that are still here to kind of help give them that language, right? So what looks like non-compliance or what might look like a lack of effort, may actually be a grief response dressed up as academic avoidance, right? And I want you to think about what if you are the trusted adult in this situation, right? What would you want your response to communicate to this student beyond academics? Drop it into the chat for me. What do you want your response to elicit, right? What do you want to say to this kid? Yes, it could be something as simple as missing them, for sure. Absolutely. So if we're the trusted adult, we're the one that this child comes to, what do we want our response to communicate to this child? Yes, we can absolutely come to a good grief event. Yes, we can go to a good grief event for sure. We can find that peer support, right? We want to make sure that we're letting this child know, listen, this isn't about academics, right? This is, yes, let them know that you hear them, validate their feelings, right? It could be something as simple as, oof, that's tough. It doesn't have to be, I joke around and I always tell folks, you don't have to have, a Hallmark moment. You don't. Just your presence, just letting them know I just dropped something really huge on this person and they are not freaking out. They are not heading for the hills, right? They, yes, letting them know that you are there for them for sure. For sure. Just mattering, just the fact that I matter to you, right? That's huge. That's huge for someone who is grieving, and even bigger for a child who doesn't have the words to say that, right? Let's try another one. So here we have a 16-year-old whose sibling died, and they refuse to go to the prom, and they really lash out whenever anybody brings it up, right? So on the surface, it might look like defiance, it might look like irritability. And to some people, they might even say, oh my goodness, you are overreacting, right? But what's actually happening underneath is so much deeper than that, right? For this teen, prom isn't just a dance, right? What is it? What do you think is going on here? It's not just a dance. What else could this teen be feeling when it comes to the prom? Right. They could be feeling like I'm not allowed to have anything fun, right. My sibling never got to go. Yeah, it's a reminder that their sibling won't be there to see them get ready, right? Or take pictures or even tease them, right? Share in that moment, right? It could bring up those thoughts like this is not how this is supposed to be, right? Or they might be thinking, man, they really should be here, right? So when a friend casually asks, oh my gosh, what are you going to wear? Or who are you going to go with? Even with the most best intentions, can feel incredibly painful, right? It can feel like everybody's forgetting them, everybody's just moving on, and they might feel like there's no space for me to grieve in this moment, right? And that lashing out, right? That's not about the friends, right? That's not about the friends. That's about the pain. It's a protective response, right? Sometimes anger is easier. Sometimes it's even safer for them than expressing that sadness, that longing or that unfairness, right? And refusing to go to the prom, that might not even be about not wanting to participate. That might not be it at all. It might be not wanting to sit in a room full of reminders of what's missing, right? And even further than that, it could be them not knowing how to carry grief and joy at the same time. They probably don't know how to do that. And so what can we do as the adults in this situation? What can we do for this student? Yes, families do often get involved with prom, yeah, and it feels super, it's like a whole familial thing, absolutely. They absolutely might feel guilty, I agree. So, if you're the trusted adult in this situation, the first thing that I want to point out, and I wish I could speak in bold and caps, but the first thing I want to point out is that prom is optional, grief is not. Right? So pushing participation can really unintentionally um, deepen this student's sense of being misunderstood. So we want to create space with very simple, non-pressuring language, right? It could be something simple as, I heard the prom's coming up. I just want you to know that whatever you decide is okay. Very simple, right? Or hey, listen, if this time of year feels really hard for you, you don't have to carry that alone. I'm here for you, right? And this communicates two really important things: choice and permission, right? They have the choice and permission to feel their feelings. And that agency is something that is so incredibly important because they have lost so much. And so having that consistency and having the agency and the permission to say, I don't think I want to do this, works wonders for them, right? The second thing that I think is really important to mention is that you want to name what other people might be avoiding, right? A lot of people like to tiptoe around grief, but gentle acknowledgement can be very grounding, right? Um, and I always am reminded, I'm not sure who at Good Grief said this, but when we were in a training, one of them was saying, always wonder, always start with a wonder, right? And if there's anybody from Good Grief on and you're the one that said it, thank you, and just drop in the chat so I can give you your props. But always wondering, right? I'm wondering if prom is bringing up, you know, thoughts about your sibling. Just wondering, right? You're not putting words in their mouth. You are opening a door. And you're probably the only one who's done it because like I said, folks like to tiptoe around grief. They don't like to see children sad. They don't like to be the one to make them upset or make them cry, right? And sometimes our grieving kids are longing for that, are longing for somebody to talk to them, to ask them, right? The third thing I think is important is, be a buffer when needed, right? If peers or staff are unintentionally overwhelming a student with prom talk, you as a trusted adult, you can step in and, give the student a quiet space to regroup, right? You can offer an out without any explanation. You can talk, right? Those multi-tiered systems of support in schools are really important. Maybe you can go to those teachers and say, hey, listen, this kid is going through X, Y, and Z. You don't have to get into the weeds and you don't have to get into any personal things, but just letting them know like they're going through it. If you see something, give me a call, let them know that they could just drop by my office, maybe come up with a signal of sorts that the two of you where they don't disrupt the class and they just kind of put thumbs up and you're like, oh, okay, this person needs their moment, right? Another thing that we can do is offer some alternative ways to mark this moment, but don't impose that on them, right? Some students might want a quiet way to acknowledge prom night without going to the prom, right? They might want to have some ideas on how they can include their sibling, right? Or a way to remember them, right? Maybe they'll have a picture, maybe they'll have something private, right? Talk to them. Let them know, right? They might not want a big slideshow with their face on there while they're at their prom too, right? They might not want that. You don't want to make this one child, the poster board child for grief, right? They don't want that. But maybe offering other things, right? They may want to do something big. They may want to ignore altogether, right? And all of those things are valid, right? All of those things are valid. Oh, I like be supportive of the decision not to attend. Absolutely. Make other plans for the special event. Oh, I love that, Marion. Is there something else you would like to do besides going to the prom? Yeah, and these are all very simple, very impactful ways to kind of open that door and see what's going on there, right? And kind of get a glimpse into what helps them. You also want to, as we say in Good Grief, stay compassionately curious, especially when you're dealing with a family. I saw someone put into the chat, sometimes proms are like a whole familial affair, right? So you want to stay really curious without making any assumptions, right? Because every family grieves differently, right? In some families, it may be great to openly talk about the sibling. In other families, it might not be that way, right? So we're gonna want, some of them might want like, yes, give me all the school support I can have. Others might be like, no, I want you to respect my privacy right now. Either way, just a simple outreach, right? A simple phone call or seeing them when they're there after school, right? That helps and it goes a long way. And something simple can sound like, hi, we're thinking about, your child as prom approaches. Is there anything you would like for us to be mindful of? Is there any way we can support you? Is there any way we can support them? Right? Because this keeps the family in the driver's seat. And again, we have that agency. So much is out of their control. So giving them, a little bit of that control back works wonders, right? And it invites you to collaborate and it won't invite defensiveness, right? You can also even share with them some observations without judgment that you've made, right? Hey, we're noticing that prom's conversations seem to be really hard for them. We're noticing that it's really tough on them when we talk about the prom. Are you seeing this at home too? Right? Kids are really good at masking things. So at home, they might have no idea what you're talking about, and they might be really grateful that you made this observation. Now, maybe now I have this permission to have this conversation with my child, right? I want you guys to steer clear of, not asking them, hey, why are they acting like this? What the heck's going on? Right? That's not helpful, right? A more helpful question is, what is this moment bringing up for them? And how can we companion them through this, right? Because again, behavior like this is just grief finding a way to speak, right? Especially when the person just doesn't have the words to say it, right? They're lashing out, they're doing all this stuff. They just don't have the words to explain what's going on with them, right? And this is my last scenario, I promise. So we have a senior gets accepted to college, but avoids telling anyone. And when he does talk about it, he says, I feel guilty about leaving my family. Now, this one is a little tricky because I haven't said that there's a death, right? But what's happening here? Remember, I said, when we're talking about grieving kids, it's not always a death-related loss. But what could be happening here? Yes, grief isn't just for death. Not at all. Yes, big changes are absolutely something to grieve over. And a lot of times we're not given that opportunity or that space. Separation and big changes, absolutely, absolutely. Moving forward can really feel like you're leaving people behind, right? And I often say that people don't talk about that transition from, even being a senior in high school and going to college, right? That's hard. That's really hard. We just expect them to do it, and we have these parties and these graduations, and we drop them off, and we're like, okay, bye. But that's really hard for them. And I haven't seen, and if anyone knows about it, please drop it in the chat. Let me know. But I haven't really seen a peer support group or something that really helps these college age kids who are not necessarily going through a death related loss, but are still going through a grief nonetheless, right? That's really hard. Transition, like I said, they can really feel like you're abandoning your loved ones, right? Or you're moving forward without them. And, I giggle here because I have a son who's in college, and, maybe this college, maybe this senior rather, has a mom who's like me and is like, you're never going to leave me, right? And we say that jokingly, right? But we're really putting something heavy on these kids, right? They want to make sure that you're okay. They want to make sure that you're not upset that they chose this university or this college over the other one, right? Um, it's really important that we really allow our children to make their choices, right? We try to guide them as best we can, but at some point we have to kind of be their companion and kind of let them forge their own paths, right? As difficult as it is, right? I just want to see what we came up with in the chat. Yeah, the school hasn't supported the decision to promote. That's huge. Some kids can't, they have to go to summer school or they've missed too many days. Fear that something might happen when they're away. Absolutely. Yeah, going to college is extremely overwhelming, right? You went from, knowing exactly what room you were going to go to, one building, sometimes two or three if you're in a bigger high school, but now you're going to an entire campus, right? Where sometimes they only know you by your social security number. And even, don't even get me started on how many times my child who called me on the phone filling out a form like, what's my social? And I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, right? Amanda writes, grieving the transition from the life they know to a new schedule, responsibility, things they haven't experienced before. Absolutely, absolutely. The family may rely on that child for helping out in the family, so the child may feel like they're abandoning the family. For sure, absolutely, right? And this is especially true, Marion, when we have firstborn, right? The oldest boy or the oldest girl. A lot of folks like lean on them a lot harder, right? Thank you so much for that. So in each of these scenarios, right, the reaction makes sense when we really consider not just the transition, but the grief that's coming there with it, right? So what can we do, right? I'm giving you these scenarios, we're bouncing around ideas, right? But what can we do, right? Let's shift into what we can actually do in our settings. And let's start with predictability, right? These are practical SEL aligned strategies, right? Predictability and routine support are very, very important because that predictability helps them know that they're safe. And it kind of helps them to start talking about different things and start processing things differently, right? So when you can, if you could offer agendas right on the board, I'm really big on visuals, really big on seeing what's going to happen next, right? Maybe you can preview the schedule changes with them, right? Giving them clear instructions for testing days, right? And extra warnings before transitions. So I really want to name something really important here. As a mom of an ADHD kid, a lot of times we will see accommodations like extra time or more time on their IEPs or their 504s, right? And that is incredibly important. Yes, right? Extra time can absolutely reduce pressure. But here's the piece that I find is missing. And please chime in the chat. I'd love to know your thoughts, right? For a lot of students, especially students who have ADHD, time is not experienced in a linear, predictable way, right? It can really feel for them that there's just two categories. There's now and there's not now. And they do not understand anything in between, right? So when we say things to them like, you have more time, you have 20 minutes, right? That information doesn't always land in a meaningful or usable way, right? And it's not that they're not listening to you. It's that time is abstract, right? And that abstraction is really hard when your brain is already in overtime, working hard to keep you regulated and keep you focused, right? So instead of putting that responsibility of tracking the time on the student, I think that we would have a lot more success if we shift that responsibility onto us, the adults, right? We're the ones that make the time visible. We're the ones that are going to make it concrete for them. We're going to hold that structure for them. And that can sound like, hey, listen, going up to the student, we're going to work on this for the next 5 minutes, and I'm going to let you know when we're halfway there, right? Or, hey, you don't have to worry about the time. I'm going to keep track of that for you, right? What really works or has worked for me in the past is letting them know, why don't we do this in small chunks, right? It's less overwhelming. And they feel like they're accomplishing more, right? Because when we throw it all at them, they just fall apart and then they feel like they're failing us. They feel like they're failing themselves, right? Using visual timers is great. Countdowns, right? Or even just a simple verbal check-in. All right, Annette, you started. Keep going. I'm going to tell you when it's time for you to pause, okay? You're doing great. Works wonders for them, right? Because what this does is that it creates a safety that it's not just that I'm getting more time, it's knowing where I am in that time, right? And during transitions, when everything already feels uncertain, that kind of structure can really make a big difference in helping that student stay regulated and stay engaged, right? Yes, I see in the chat. I found using timers helps when you hear the sound, it's time to transition. Absolutely. Those visual cues really do help, especially a child who may be neurodiverse or ADD or ADHD. Regulation routines, right? You can have 2 minute grounding, you can have those 5 finger breathing, right? You can have those mindful arrival moments. There's a website, and before you go, I'll make sure to put it in chat and I'll also send it to you as follow-up email. But there's a website and it's called blissfulkids.com. And I just love what they put on their website. She has all of these wonderful little routines that you can build into your day. But the best thing that she has is that she says, good news, you don't need a script, you don't need a bell, or even a Zen garden, just 3 minutes and a little curiosity. And I mean, I was sold because sometimes we get so bogged down on, what mindfulness is and how it's supposed to look and what social media tells us it is. And, I don't have enough sand for a Zen garden, right? But letting us know that we don't need all of that, right? We just need 3 minutes and we just need to be a little curious, compassionately curious, as we like to say, and it would really help. I'm also a huge believer in brain breaks in general, and especially during high stress weeks, right? Brain breaks, they're often thought of as something for like the younger little kids, but the reality is they're super important at any age. And at the most basic level, our brains are not designed to sustain attention for long periods of times without rest, right? Attention naturally cycles, and when we push past that limit, especially during high stress times like testing or transition, we're going to start to see that fatigue, that irritability, that disengagement, right? Those kids who were sitting nicely in their little carpet square are now like pushing into each other's carpet squares, right? And for students who are already carrying grief on top of that or are navigating a big change, their nervous systems are working even harder in the background, right? So what might look like they're losing focus is just actually overload. So brain breaks really help interrupt that cycle. They really help to give our nervous system a chance to reset, right? And that could be through movement, through breathing, or just simply a pause in this cognitive demand that they're constantly having, right? And it's not just for younger students, right? Older students, middle school, high school, we even built in brain breaks for our adults when they're in our workshops, right? The need is still there. It just looks a little different, right? It might be a quick stand and stretch. It might be, if you've been to any of our trainings, a rock, paper, scissor tournament. Amazing. Lots of fun. Because when we build, that intentional break, we're not losing instructional time. I promise you, we're not. We're protecting our students' ability to stay engaged, to stay regulated, right? To stay present, right? It's important that we start to normalize those pauses, right? Um, During transition heavy times, right? These small resets can make a really big difference in how a child moves throughout their day, right? Sometimes what looks like disengagement is actually a nervous system begging for a pause. Let me see what you guys have in the chat. Yes, using timers help. I love timers. Timers are like my savior, not just for my kids, but for me as well. Like I'll get caught up in something and then I'm just like, oh, our fish is burning. So timers are a huge help for everyone. Some checkout tools that I have seen are tried and true. We have emoji scales, right? Where are you on this scale? And do you have some calming strategies that help you out? My favorite is what color are you? And this one right here, this meh, is like my ultimate favorite. Meh. Because I think meh can mean so many different things, right? We have that one word pulse check. Simple. You could put it on a post-it card. You can have it, up in the front, in the back. You can even have the children leave it on their desks so that they don't feel like everybody's watching them. Have everybody have a different color so they don't assume that one color is something else, right? These really help students kind of externalize what they can't articulate, right? A pick a card emotion prompt is amazing because they get to read through the emotion. They get to see, oh, so and so is feeling how I was feeling, or maybe it wasn't about the puzzle that you were working on that you gave up. Maybe it was something else that happened, and this kind of helps bridge that gap. I will say that a way to make this successful is really allowing the students to pass, right? Or maybe pick another card, right? Because this really creates a safety base for them. You don't want to be so into the rules that you're like, nope, you have to go and you have to pick that card. Because what we're trying to lay down is that safety base. And when you're telling them that they have no choice and no agency in the matter, you won't be able to get that safety base, right? One way that we do that at Good Grief is I'm sure you probably heard either it being said in a workshop or it being said on a webinar, right? We do everything popcorn style. So when you feel hot, you pop. And if you want to pass, that's fine. We never take silence as disengagement, right? You'd be so surprised by just shifting that just a little bit. Hey, when you're hot, you pop. If you don't want to go, that's fine. If you want to pick a different card, that's fine. You'll get a lot more of that buy-in. So these are not scripts per se, but these are just things that you can just go to and put them in your own voice, right? That will really help when a child is going through something, right? So saying, man, this must be really hard. I don't, or even what we like to our go-to at Good Grief is like, I don't even know what to say. First, thanks for telling me, right? Just little things that you can kind of reach for and always kind of have in the back of your mind. Another really good one that we have on your screen right now is that you don't have to be excited just because everybody else is, right? You don't have to want to go if you don't want to. That's okay. What we really want you to stay away from are those very well-intended um, euphemisms, right? Oh, you should be happy. It's not a big deal. Everybody goes through this, right? This one is huge. Your loved one would want you to. And this might feel a little less obvious because it's a little twofold here, right? One, it's really important that we understand that um, we don't know if this was a loved one, right? We don't know what kind of relationship was there. That's the first thing, right? Not everybody that dies is a good person. And forcing this on someone who probably did not have a good relationship with them, is not a way to set that safety base that we're looking for, right? And then that added pressure, right, to do this for our person's legacy. But what about our own legacy? What if I don't want to do what they wanted me to do, right? What if their death for me is something freeing? We don't know. So that's why at Good Grief, we don't say loved one, right? We say person who died. That's not to say if one of our participants say it's my dad, we don't say no, person who died, right? We respect them, we give them their agency, but we never assume a relationship, right? Because what that's going to do is more harm than good. And again, I'm not saying these things like to chastise anybody or to make anyone feel bad. These are all done with the best of intentions. Um, but they do more harm than good. It's way better to stick to these, right? I don't know what to say. I'm just glad you told me, right? I this moment is so huge. You could feel more than one thing at the same time. Those are okay. I want to spend the last couple of minutes that we have together talking about these micro rituals, right? Because the word ritual can sometimes feel really, really intimidating, or people assume that it has to be religious or it has to be formal, right? But rituals don't have to be religious at all. At their core, rituals are just simply intentional, repeated actions that create meaning and create connection, right? And in the context of grief and transitions, rituals can really help students feel anchored, right? They can create this sense of continuity when everything else feels like it's changing and falling apart, right? And classrooms and clinical spaces are actually perfect places for this because you already have the routine. You're just adding a layer of intention and meaning to them. So micro rituals can be really, really simple, right? They could be something like a small token that the student carries during a big moment, maybe a bracelet or an object that represents someone that they're missing, maybe a quiet moment before a test. Um, some art-based activities and art-based acknowledgments are really good, right? Maybe writing a name or writing a memory somewhere private or somewhere that's just for you guys, right? Even a consistent check-in or a closing practice, right? I'm going to come every day at this time, um, and we're going to talk about your person, or we're going to draw about your person, or we're going to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, right? These aren't big, these aren't time-consuming practices, but they do create that space for acknowledgement. And that's key, right? Acknowledging, letting somebody know that they matter, letting them know, I see you, right? And I see that you're not okay, and I'm going to be here with you in it. Because grief a lot of times goes unspoken in schools. And rituals really give students a way to hold their experience without having to explain it. It says to them, you can bring all of yourself into this moment, your grief, your memories, your feelings, right? And all of that is welcome here. And no one is asking you to move on. We're asking you to move forward. We're not asking you to move on without them, right? And during transitions, right, like we talked about the prom and the testing and graduation, these small acts of connection can make these moments feel less overwhelming and a little more held, right? Rituals don't take the grief away, but it does help students not feel alone in it. when we think about transition, a lot of focus goes into prepping this student academically or logistically, but emotional preparation is just as important, right? So for students who are grieving, everything feels uncertain. The future is super overwhelming, super unpredictable. It's not safe because I don't know what's coming. So instead of focusing on getting through the transition, we want to help students feel supported as they move towards it, right? So one simple and very powerful way to do that is helping them hold two things at the same time, right? Might be a worry and a hope. You might ask them, what's one thing that's coming up that you're worried about? And what's one thing that you're looking forward towards, one thing that you're hoping for, right? This does a few things. It gives students permission to name their fear or to name what's going on without trying to fix it right away. And it also reminds them that multiple feelings can exist at the same time, right? So if a student tells you, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z, then you can say, well, let's make a small plan for that. What might help you feel a little bit more supported, right? What we're doing here is helping a student build a sense of future safety, right? Not by removing the uncertainty, but by reminding them that they don't have to face it by themselves, right? Supporting the future isn't about certainty. You don't want to say that or convey that, right? You don't want to be like, oh, everything's going to be fine. You're fine. Everything's great. It's about connecting, right? I don't know, but let's see if we can plan for that. And then finally, one of the most powerful tools that we have in schools is how we talk to students, right? Especially during moments of transition and stress. And the goal here isn't to have the perfect words, right? It's to have the language that helps them feel seen, feel safe, and feel supported. And I like to think about this, like you see on your screen, in four simple moves. Validate, right? Start by acknowledging what the student is feeling. Normalize it, help them understand you're not alone in this experience, right? And that really reduces that shame and that isolation, especially for students who feel kind of like out of sync with their peers, right? Support, you want to reassure them that they do not have to go through this by themselves. We can do this together one step at a time. And support can look different as well. Maybe you're the homeroom teacher. Maybe you don't have a very close relationship with this student, but you're noticing something and you're like, all right, maybe they don't want to talk to me, but I'm going to go to their science teacher. And I know they have a good relationship with the science teacher. And I'm going to be like, hey, I noticed X, Y, and Z, right? That multi-tiered system of support. And then plan, right? Gently move towards something concrete and manageable, right? What might help you get through this part of the day? What's one thing that would make this just a little easier for you? We want to make sure that we're avoiding language that is minimizing them or rushing them to experience something, right? It's not a big deal. Just focus. You'll be fine. Again, well-intentioned, but these phrases can really cause a student to shut down. So supportive language doesn't really take more time. It just changes the experience of the time that you're already in. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with just one key reminder, right? Grief doesn't pause for milestones. And although spring is often reframed or rather framed as a season of renewal and celebration and forward movement, um, grief doesn't follow that same seasonal rhythm, right? For a lot of students this time of year can really heighten their emotional load. Because again, milestones don't just mark progress, they also mark absence, right? And what's being celebrated in one space may be really, really painful in another. So when we think about support, especially during spring transitions, we're not just responding to academic or behavioral needs. We're responding to the whole emotional landscape that this child might be carrying. And in practice, this can look like slowing down our assumptions, offering that flexibility when we can, and really remembering that connection matters more than correction in these moments. And students don't need grieving students, grieving people in general. They do not need to be resolved. They do not need to be fixed, right? They need to know that they don't have to leave their grief or their person behind in order to belong, in order to be seen, and in order to be heard, right? These milestones are going to keep coming, but so will the grief. And our care is really what helps hold both of that. And of course, we have our closing today. I want to close the same way that we began, right? With that moment of just breathing and reconnecting, right? So again, if you're able to sit comfortably where you are, you can close your eyes if you can, if that feels okay, or simply soften your gaze. I can't see you, but other people can see you. So I don't want you to get in trouble, all right? Just nice and calm in your chairs or wherever you are. And let's take a collective breath together. We're going to go in through our nose for 3. But this time, when we're exhaling, we're going to make a sound. We're just going to let it all out because, again, I can't hear you. So it's okay. All right. So in through our nose. 1, 2, 3. And when we exhale, just let it all out. We're going to, oh, I needed that. And as you slowly come back into this space and we're nearing our 1 hour mark, I want you to return to that student you called to your mind at the beginning of our time together, right? That student that was navigating this grief. And just notice what comes up for you now. Maybe you have a little more understanding. Maybe you have a little more language, a little more patience or clarity around what they might be carrying, and without needing to fix anything. I invite you for the rest of today to have, or to hold rather, one small intention, right? Think of what's one way that you might show up for this student differently. Maybe you're going to do a check-in. Maybe you're going to have some more patience. Maybe you're just going to remember that, what you're seeing might be grief, and just let that intention sit with you. Thank you all so much for the care you bring into your work every day, for the spaces that you hold for your students and staff every day. And I know that you do it in ways that often go unseen, but I want you to know that I see you. I thank you. You matter. Your experiences matter. And I hope to see you at many more of our wonderful webinars, or maybe even in person for a tour. I'm going to give you back your day, guys. Thank you so much.